When you think about the ocean, you probably imagine the serene blue waters we see today, teeming with dolphins, whales, and colorful fish. But what if I told you that the oceans of the past were nothing like what we know now? What if the waters that once covered our planet were actually nightmarish battlegrounds, ruled by creatures so terrifying and powerful that they make today's great white sharks look like minnows? For millions of years, the seas were dominated by monsters that would challenge everything you think you know about marine life. Scientists have been shocked to discover just how brutal and unforgiving these ancient waters really were. In this video, we'll explore the true rulers of the prehistoric seas and discover why the ocean's past was far more dangerous than anyone ever imagined. If you like these videos, I would appreciate if you clicked like or subscribed, as it's important for the channel and it helps others find it too, just like you did. Thank you. Now, let's get started. Imagine a time when our planet wore a completely different face. The continents hadn't yet wandered into their current positions, drifting slowly across the surface like puzzle pieces that hadn't found their final arrangement. The moon hung closer to Earth then, its gravitational pull tugging at the waters with a force we can barely comprehend today. This created tides that surged with tremendous power, reshaping coastlines with every rhythmic pulse. The sun blazed with an intensity that would seem alien to us now, heating the atmosphere until moisture hung heavy in the air like a perpetual steam bath. Under this scorching celestial furnace, the oceans sprawled across vast stretches of the planet's surface, claiming territory that today lies beneath our feet as dry land. These weren't the familiar blue waters we know from vacation postcards, but something far more primordial, far more unsettling. Think about the fundamental nature of abundance and how it shapes the world around us. When resources flow freely, life doesn't simply relax into peaceful coexistence. Instead, abundance creates its own unique form of chaos. The nutrient-rich waters of these ancient seas became a catalyst for something extraordinary and terrifying. Competition intensified rather than diminished, pushing creatures toward evolutionary extremes that seem almost impossible by today's standards. Evolution, in its relentless creativity, began crafting organisms that were fundamentally different from anything swimming in our modern oceans. Size became a primary weapon in this aquatic arms race. Creatures grew to proportions that challenge our understanding of what marine life could become. But sheer bulk was only the beginning of their adaptations. Consider how darkness shapes perception and survival. In the deeper regions of these ancient waters, where sunlight never penetrated, creatures developed sensory systems that operated on principles we're still trying to understand. Eyes that could detect the faintest traces of bioluminescence, lateral line systems that could sense the subtlest water movements from incredible distances. These weren't just fish with better night vision, they were living detection systems. The concept of the perfect predator took on new meaning during this era, we call the Mesozoic, stretching from roughly 252 million to 66 million years ago. Jaws evolved into crushing mechanisms capable of splintering bone and armor. With ease, teeth developed into specialized tools. Some designed for slicing, others for puncturing, still, others for grinding through the toughest protective shells. Speed became another dimension of this evolutionary competition. Some creatures developed the ability to move through water with an efficiency that puts modern marine animals to shame. They could accelerate from stillness to devastating velocity in mere moments, turning the vast open ocean into a hunting ground with no safe spaces. But perhaps the most unsettling adaptation was patience. Certain predators learned the art of motionless waiting, becoming living shadows in the water column. They would hover in perfect stillness for hours, days even, until the perfect moment presented itself. This wasn't just hunting, it was a form of aquatic meditation, with lethal consequences. The shallow waters, which we might assume offered some refuge from the giants of the deep, presented their own unique dangers. These areas became staging grounds for ambush predators that had perfected the art of concealment. They would bury themselves in sediment or position themselves among primitive coral formations, becoming indistinguishable from the environment until it was far too late for their prey to escape. Armor became both a defense mechanism and an evolutionary challenge. Creatures developed shells and protective coverings of incredible thickness and complexity, only to face predators that evolved specifically to crack these defenses. This created an endless cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation, each side constantly pushing the other toward more extreme solutions. The very chemistry of these ancient oceans contributed to their hostile nature. Higher concentrations of certain minerals created water that was more corrosive, more challenging to navigate. The temperature variations between different depths and regions created currents and thermoclines that could disorient even the most experienced swimmers. Bioluminescence played a crucial role in this underwater theater of survival. Creatures developed the ability to produce their own light, not just for communication, but as weapons of war. Some used bright flashes to blind attackers, others created false signals to lure prey into traps. The darkness of the depths became a canvas for an alien light show of predation and survival. When we contemplate these ancient waters, we're forced to confront the raw power of evolutionary pressure. Every creature that survived did so by becoming something more than its ancestors, something adapted to thrive in conditions that would be instantly fatal to most modern marine life. The ocean wasn't just their habitat, it was their sculptor, carving them into forms of terrible perfection. The fossil record gives us glimpses of this lost world, fragments of teeth and bone, that hint at the incredible drama that once played out beneath the waves. Each discovery forces us to expand our understanding of what life can become when pushed to its absolute limits. These weren't monsters in the fictional sense. They were the inevitable result of millions of years of refinement in the crucible of survival. Deep in the muddy waters of ancient North America, around 80 million years ago, something truly enormous was waiting. Deinosuchus, a name that simply means terrible crocodile, lived up to its reputation in every possible way. Picture a crocodile, but then imagine scaling it up to the size of a school bus. That's what we're dealing with here. This creature stretched up to 35 feet from snout to tail, weighing roughly 7 tons. To put that in perspective, modern saltwater crocodiles, which are already impressively large, rarely exceed 20 feet. Deinosuchus was nearly twice that length. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the limits nature sets for itself, and how those limits seem to shift dramatically across geological time. The skull alone measured almost 6 feet long. Think about that for a moment. A skull longer than most people are tall. Those jaws were lined with teeth that could reach 6 inches in length, shaped like perfect cones, designed not for slicing, but for crushing. These weren't teeth meant to cut through flesh delicately. They were bone crushers, pure and simple. Scientists estimate that Deinosuchus could bite down with a force of 18,000 pounds per square inch. That's potentially stronger than even Tyrannosaurus rex. We actually have evidence of this incredible power, fossilized dinosaur bones bearing bite marks that match perfectly with Deinosuchus' teeth. Some of these bones show signs of healing, which tells us something fascinating. Sometimes the dinosaur actually survived the encounter. The hunting strategy would have been familiar to anyone who's watched modern crocodiles. Patience, above all else, defined their approach to survival. They would submerge themselves almost completely, leaving just their eyes and nostrils above the waterline. Hours could pass, maybe even days, as they waited motionlessly for the right moment. Imagine a massive dinosaur, perhaps a hadrosaur, or even a smaller tyrannosaur, approaching the water's edge for a drink. The water appears calm, peaceful, even. Then, in an explosion of movement that would be over in seconds, Deinosuchus would launch itself upward. Those enormous jaws would clamp down with devastating force, often ending the struggle with a single bite. But here's something interesting about apex predators. They're rarely picky eaters. While Deinosuchus certainly hunted dinosaurs, it probably ate whatever was available: fish, turtles, other aquatic reptiles, even carrion, when the opportunity arose. This dietary flexibility likely contributed to its success across such a vast geographic range. Fossils have been found from Montana all the way down to northern Mexico, suggesting these animals thrived in various aquatic environments. Freshwater rivers, estuaries, coastal plains, they adapted to whatever habitat they encountered. There's something almost philosophical about this adaptability, the way life finds methods to persist and flourish regardless of circumstances. Living alongside some of the most famous dinosaurs in Earth's history, Dinosuchus occupied a unique ecological niche. It was essentially the ruler of any body of water it inhabited. Other large animals, including predatory dinosaurs, would have had to consider the risk every time they approached water sources. The late Cretaceous period was ending though, and with it came changes that even the mighty Dinosuchus couldn't survive. Climate shifts, habitat alterations, the complex web of ecological relationships that keep ecosystems balanced, all of these factors likely contributed to their eventual extinction. It reminds us how even the most successful predators are ultimately subject to forces beyond their control. What's remarkable is that crocodilians as a group have been around for over 200 million years. They've witnessed the rise and fall of dinosaurs, survived mass extinctions that wiped out countless other species, and continue to thrive today. Dinosuchus represents just one chapter in this incredibly long story of evolutionary success. Modern crocodiles and alligators are direct descendants of this ancient lineage. When you see a crocodile today, you're looking at a design that's been refined over geological timescales. The basic body plan, the hunting strategy, the semi-aquatic lifestyle, all of these elements have proven remarkably effective across vast spans of time. There's something humbling about contemplating these ancient giants. Dinosuchus ruled its domain with absolute authority for millions have existed as a species. Far longer than humans have existed as a species. It raises questions about permanence, about what it truly means to be successful in nature's terms. The fossil record gives us glimpses into this lost world, fragments of bone and teeth that tell stories of predator and prey interactions from eons past. Each discovery adds another piece to our understanding of how ecosystems functioned when giant reptiles dominated both land and water. In the grand narrative of life on Earth, Dinosuchus holds a special place as perhaps the ultimate crocodilian predator. It represents the pinnacle of what this body plan could achieve under the right circumstances. The terrible crocodile, as its name suggests, was truly terrible in the original sense of the word, inspiring awe and fear in equal measure. During the Mesozoic era, when dinosaurs roamed the land, something equally fascinating was happening beneath the waves. Ancient oceans teemed with creatures that seem almost alien to us today. Among these marine reptiles, plesiosaurs stand out as some of the most extraordinary predators ever to glide through prehistoric seas. Picture a creature that looks like nature decided to experiment with body proportions. Plesiosaurs had tiny heads, impossibly long necks, bulky rounded bodies, and 4 massive flippers. This design might seem awkward at first glance, but evolution rarely makes mistakes. Every feature served a purpose, honed by millions of years of survival. The neck alone tells a remarkable story. Some species could stretch their necks 10 times the length of their bodies. Elasmosaurus exemplifies this extreme adaptation perfectly. Its neck contained over 70 vertebrae, compared to just 7 in most mammals, including humans. This anatomical marvel wasn't just for show, it was a precision hunting instrument. Size varied dramatically across different plesiosaur species. While some measured a modest 10 feet in length, giants like certain long-necked varieties could reach 50 feet from nose to tail. That's longer than a school bus, gliding silently through ancient waters. The diversity in size reflects how these reptiles adapted to different ecological niches over their lengthy evolutionary history. Their hunting strategy reveals nature's ingenuity in action. Rather than chasing prey at high speeds, plesiosaurs mastered the art of stealth. They would position their bulky bodies at a distance, then snake their long necks forward like underwater periscopes. Fish and squid had little warning before those sharp teeth clamped down with lightning precision. This approach required minimal energy expenditure, a clever evolutionary solution. The main body remained nearly motionless, while the neck did most of the work. It's similar to how a crane operates, keeping the heavy machinery stable, while extending its arm to reach specific targets. Efficiency often trumps brute force in nature's designs. Their flippers deserve special attention too. These weren't simple paddles, they were sophisticated propulsion systems. 4 large muscular limbs provided both power and maneuverability. Unlike fish that rely primarily on tail movement, plesiosaurs developed a 4-stroke swimming technique that gave them exceptional control in 3-dimensional space. The tail, interestingly, played a secondary role. While many marine reptiles used powerful tail strokes for speed, plesiosaurs treated their tails more like rudders. This design choice makes sense when you consider their hunting style. Sudden bursts of speed mattered less than precise positioning and quick strikes. Diet tells us much about how these creatures lived. Plesiosaurs weren't particularly selective eaters. Small fish formed the bulk of their meals, along with squid, shellfish, and occasionally smaller marine reptiles. Their teeth were designed for grasping slippery prey, rather than crushing hard shells or bones. This specialization limited their menu but made them extremely effective within their chosen niche. Habitat preferences varied among species, but most plesiosaurs could handle both shallow coastal waters and deeper ocean environments. This flexibility allowed them to follow food sources and avoid competition. Some fossil evidence suggests they may have ventured into river mouths and estuaries, expanding their hunting grounds even further. The solitary nature of plesiosaur hunting sets them apart from many modern marine predators. Unlike dolphins that coordinate complex group hunts, or even some ancient marine reptiles that may have worked together, plesiosaurs operated alone. This independence required them to be completely self-sufficient hunters, masters of individual technique, rather than social cooperation. Their sensory capabilities remain somewhat mysterious, but we can make educated guesses based on skull structure and modern analogues. Large eye sockets suggest good vision, essential for spotting prey in murky water. The long neck also functioned as a mobile observation platform, allowing them to survey large areas without revealing their position. Consider how this body plan influenced their daily existence. Every morning brought the same challenge: finding enough food to fuel a body that could weigh several tons. The elegant solution lay in energy conservation through efficient design. Why waste energy chasing fast fish when you can position yourself strategically and strike with surgical precision? Modern misconceptions often portray these creatures as slow, cumbersome monsters. Popular culture, influenced by cryptozoology and lake monster legends, has painted an inaccurate picture. Real plesiosaurs were anything but sluggish. They were refined, killing machines, shaped by evolutionary pressure to excel in their specific environment. The extinction of plesiosaurs at the end of the Cretaceous period removed a unique body plan from Earth's oceans. No modern animal quite fills their ecological role. This absence makes us appreciate how evolution can produce solutions that seem impossible until we see them in action. Sometimes the most unlikely designs prove to be the most successful, at least for a time. Their fossil record spans roughly 180 million years, from the late Triassic through the end of the Cretaceous. This longevity speaks to their successful adaptation. Many species came and went, but the basic plesiosaur blueprint endured through massive environmental changes, ice ages, and shifting ocean chemistry. Perhaps most remarkably, plesiosaurs challenge our assumptions about what works in nature. Their proportions seem wrong by conventional standards, yet they thrived for far longer than humans have existed. This reminds us that evolution operates by different rules than human engineering, often finding solutions that surprise us with their effectiveness. Back in the Triassic period, around 248 to 234 million years ago, the world was experimenting with life forms that seem almost too strange to be real. One of these creatures, Tanistropheus, challenges every assumption we might have about what makes a successful predator. Here was an animal that looked like nature's attempt at creating something completely unprecedented, and yet it thrived for millions of years. The most striking thing about Tanistropheus wasn't its size, but its proportions. Picture a reptile with a neck that could stretch up to 10 times the length of its body. This wasn't some clumsy evolutionary mistake, though. This was precision engineering, crafted by millions of years of natural selection. Every vertebra in that impossibly long neck was perfectly positioned to create a weapon of remarkable efficiency. What's fascinating is how this neck actually worked. The vertebrae weren't just randomly elongated, they were specifically designed to provide both flexibility and stability. When Tanistropheus needed to strike, its head could dart forward with lightning speed while its body remained perfectly still. Think about the physics involved here. The creature had essentially turned its entire neck into a biological spear launcher. This kind of adaptation tells us something profound about how life responds to challenges. Environmental pressures during the Triassic were intense, competition was fierce, and survival demanded innovation. Tanistropheus didn't just adapt, it revolutionized what it meant to be a long-necked predator. While other creatures lumbered about, this animal had discovered the secret of turning apparent vulnerability into devastating advantage. The reptile belonged to a family called the Tanistrophiids, part of a larger group known as archosauromorphs. These were the relatives of modern crocodiles, birds, and the long-extinct dinosaurs. What's remarkable is that several members of this family, including Langobardosaurus and Pectodon, all independently evolved similar elongated necks. This suggests that during the Triassic, having an extremely long neck was such a successful strategy that evolution kept returning to the same solution. But Tanistropheus wasn't just about the neck. Its body told an equally compelling story of adaptation. The torso was compact and streamlined. The legs were relatively short but powerful, especially the hind limbs. These proportions paint a picture of an animal that spent considerable time in the water, but not in the way we might expect. Early scientists thought Tanistropheus might have swum like a crocodile, using its body and tail in powerful undulating motions. More recent research suggests something quite different. The creature likely propelled itself through water, more like a frog, using strong kicks from those powerful hind legs. The tail probably served as a rudder and provided additional thrust during quick bursts of speed. This swimming style makes perfect sense when you consider the animal's hunting strategy. Tanistropheus wasn't built for long-distance swimming. It was designed for explosive ambush attacks. Picture it lurking in shallow coastal waters, body hidden among coccortic vegetation, that incredible neck coiled and ready to strike. When unsuspecting prey wandered within range, the attack would be over in seconds. The diet of Tanistropheus has been debated for decades, but recent fossil discoveries are finally providing answers. The shape of its skull and teeth suggests it was primarily piscivorous, meaning it fed mainly on fish and cephalopods like ancient squids. The jaws were perfectly designed for gripping slippery prey, with sharp teeth arranged to prevent escape. What's particularly interesting is how the animal's diet seemed to change as it grew. Younger individuals focused on smaller prey, while adults tackled much larger animals. This kind of ontogenetic diet shift speaks to the creature's opportunistic nature. Tanistropheus wasn't a picky eater. It was an adaptable predator that could exploit whatever food sources were available. The question of whether Tanistropheus was primarily aquatic or terrestrial sparked scientific debates that lasted for years. Early interpretations suggested it was mainly a land-dwelling animal, using its long neck to scan for prey while maintaining an S-shaped posture. Some scientists imagined it hunting, like certain modern reptiles, body poised to pounce while the neck did the reconnaissance work. However, more detailed anatomical studies have shifted our understanding. The evidence now points strongly toward a semi-aquatic lifestyle. Those powerful hind legs, the streamlined body, specific features of the tail, all suggest an animal equally at home in water and on land. It probably spent most of its time in shallow coastal environments, hunting along muddy shorelines and in submerged vegetation. This versatility was perhaps Tanistropheus's greatest strength. By mastering both terrestrial and aquatic hunting, it had access to prey that purely land-based, or purely water-based predators couldn't reach. It could snatch fish from shallow pools, grab small reptiles from shoreline rocks, or ambush marine invertebrates in tidal zones. The success of Tanistrophes raises profound questions about the nature of evolutionary innovation. Here was a creature that looked almost ridiculous by modern standards, yet it dominated its ecological niche for millions of years. Its design challenges our assumptions about what works in nature, reminding us that successful adaptation often takes forms we would never predict. The Triassic period was a time of extraordinary experimentation in reptilian body plans. Ecosystems were recovering from the Great Permian extinction, and life was exploring new possibilities with remarkable creativity. Tanistrophes represents the boldness of this evolutionary moment, when nature was willing to try radical solutions to survival challenges. Perhaps most remarkably, the specialized adaptations of Tanistrophes worked in perfect harmony. The elongated neck required specific muscle arrangements and skeletal modifications. The semi-aquatic lifestyle demanded particular limb proportions and swimming adaptations. The opportunistic feeding strategy needed versatile jaw mechanics and sensory capabilities. Every aspect of the animal's anatomy was integrated into a coherent whole. This integration reminds us that evolution doesn't work by committee or follow engineering blueprints. Instead, it's a process of constant experimentation, where success is measured not by elegance or logical design, but by simple survival. Tanistrophes survived and thrived precisely because its seemingly bizarre adaptations worked perfectly together in its specific environment. The legacy of Tanistrophes extends far beyond its own existence. It demonstrates that during crucial periods of Earth's history, life was capable of innovations that seem almost impossible by today's standards. The creature reminds us that our modern world, with its familiar animals and predictable ecosystems, represents just one moment in a vast story of biological experimentation. As the Triassic period progressed and gave way to new geological epochs, the specific environmental conditions that favored Tanistrophes gradually disappeared. The shallow coastal environments it had mastered changed, competition from new predators intensified, and the window of opportunity for ultra-long-necked reptiles slowly closed. Yet for millions of years, this remarkable creature had shown that nature's creativity knows no bounds, that survival can take forms stranger than any fiction we might imagine. Picture the vast oceans of millions of years ago, during what we called the Mesozoic era, when the world looked completely different from today. In these ancient waters swam creatures that challenge our understanding of what reptiles could become. The ichthyosaurs, whose name literally translates to fish lizards, represent one of evolution's most remarkable experiments. These weren't your typical, cold-blooded, slow-moving reptiles that we might imagine basking on rocks. Instead, they had transformed into something that would look surprisingly familiar to us today. When we look at dolphins racing through modern oceans, we're actually seeing an echo from the deep past. Ichthyosaurs developed almost identical body shapes to these marine mammals, even though they shared no recent common ancestors. This phenomenon, called convergent evolution, reveals something profound about the laws that govern life on Earth. When similar challenges arise, life tends to find similar solutions, regardless of the starting point. It's as if the ocean itself shapes its inhabitants according to certain unchangeable rules. The transformation from land-dwelling reptiles to ocean masters didn't happen overnight. Over countless generations, these creatures gradually shed their terrestrial heritage. Their legs morphed into paddle, like appendages, perfect for steering through water, but useless for walking on solid ground. Their bodies became torpedo-shaped, minimizing drag as they cut through the waves. Most dramatically, their tails evolved into powerful crescent-shaped propellers, oriented vertically, like those of sharks rather than horizontally like whale flukes. Speed became their signature trait. Modern estimates suggest some ichthyosaurs could reach velocities of 40 kilometers per hour, making them among the fastest predators in their aquatic realm. This speed wasn't just for show, it was a matter of survival, in an ocean filled with other formidable hunters. Their elongated snouts bristled with sharp, cone-shaped teeth, perfectly designed for grasping slippery prey, like fish and squid. Every aspect of their anatomy spoke to one purpose: efficient predation in three-dimensional space. Size varied tremendously among different ichthyosaur species, revealing the diverse strategies evolution employed. Some remained relatively modest at around 2 to 4 meters in length, built for quick bursts of acceleration to catch agile prey. These smaller species were like the sports cars of the ancient seas, trading size for maneuverability. At the other extreme stood true giants, with the largest known specimen, Ichthyotine savanensis, stretching an estimated 25 meters from snout to tail. These behemoths rivaled modern blue whales in size, representing a completely different approach to ocean dominance. The eyes of ichthyosaurs tell their own fascinating story. Some species possessed eyes up to 30 centimeters in diameter, among the largest known in the animal kingdom. These massive visual organs weren't merely impressive, they served a crucial function in the dim underwater world. Large eyes gather more light, allowing these predators to hunt effectively in the perpetual twilight of deeper waters. It's a reminder that in the ocean, information often matters more than raw power. Unlike modern reptiles that must lay eggs on land, ichthyosaurs had completely severed their ties to terrestrial life. They gave birth to live young directive strategy that freed them from ever needing to return to shore. Fossil evidence shows newborns emerging tail first, much like modern whales, suggesting these ancient reptiles had solved the same physiological challenges that marine mammals face today. This complete adaptation to aquatic life represents one of evolution's most successful transitions between environments. Social behavior among ichthyosaurs adds another layer to their complexity. Evidence suggests some species hunted in coordinated groups, a behavior rarely seen in modern reptiles, but common among intelligent marine mammals. This social hunting would have amplified their effectiveness as predators, allowing them to tackle larger prey or herd schools of fish with strategic precision. The implications extend beyond mere feeding, suggesting these creatures possessed cognitive abilities sophisticated enough to coordinate complex group behaviors. Their sensory capabilities matched their physical prowess. Those enormous eyes were complemented by other adaptations that helped them navigate the three-dimensional maze of the open ocean. Like modern marine mammals, they breathed air and had to surface regularly, but their respiratory systems were highly efficient. They could hold their breath for extended periods, some species likely diving to considerable depths in pursuit of deep-water prey like ancient cephalopods. The diversity within ichthyosaur lineages reveals evolution's experimental nature. Some species developed specialized feeding strategies, targeting different prey types to reduce competition. Smaller forms chased swift fish through coral reefs and shallow seas, while giants prowled the open ocean for larger quarry. Some developed crushing teeth suitable for breaking the shells of ammonites, those coiled nautilus relatives that were abundant in ancient seas. This ecological partitioning allowed multiple ichthyosaur species to coexist in the same waters. Competition wasn't limited to different species, hunting different prey. Fossil evidence reveals bite marks and healed injuries that suggest ichthyosaurs sometimes fought each other, possibly over territory, mates, or prime hunting grounds. These ancient battle scars remind us that even successful predators faced constant challenges, not just from their prey but from their own kind. The ocean has always been an arena where only the most capable survive. Their reign lasted for tens of millions of years, spanning much of the Mesozoic era. During this time, they watched continents drift, sea levels rise and fall, and countless other species appear and vanish. Their longevity as a group testifies to the effectiveness of their adaptations. Yet, eventually, even these masters of the sea faced challenges they couldn't overcome. Changing ocean conditions, new competitors, and shifting food webs gradually eroded their dominance. The comparison to modern dolphins and whales isn't merely superficial. Both groups solved similar problems in remarkably similar ways, despite being separated by millions of years and completely different evolutionary origins. This convergence suggests that certain solutions are simply optimal for life in the ocean. discovered independently whenever vertebrates make the transition from land to sea. It's a testament to both the constraints and the creativity of evolutionary processes. Today, ichthyosaurs exist only as fossils, but their legacy lives on in every dolphin that leaps from the waves and every whale that sounds into the depths. They proved that evolution can completely remake an animal's body plan when the rewards are sufficient. From terrestrial reptiles emerged creatures so perfectly adapted to marine life that they challenge our categories and expectations. In their streamlined forms and efficient hunting strategies, we glimpse the timeless principles that govern life in Earth's oceans, principles that continue to shape marine predators today. The late Cretaceous oceans tell a story of transformation, where one group of creatures managed to rewrite the rules of marine dominance entirely. Picture ancient seas where massive reptilian forms glided through the water, their presence commanding respect from every other living thing around them. These were the mosasaurs. And their rise to power represents one of nature's most remarkable success stories. What makes their story so fascinating is how they began. These ocean titans didn't start as sea creatures at all. They evolved from lizards, relatives of the monitor lizards, and snakes we see today, creatures that once crawled along shorelines and waded through shallow waters. The transition from land to sea required countless adaptations, each one fine-tuned over millions of years. Around 98 million years ago, the first mosasaurs appeared in the fossil record. Their timing was perfect, arriving just as the oceans were becoming vast highways of opportunity. These early pioneers quickly discovered that the marine world offered resources beyond anything available on land. Food was abundant, territories were vast, and for creatures willing to fully commit to aquatic life, the rewards were extraordinary. The physical transformation these animals underwent is nothing short of remarkable. Their bodies became streamlined torpedoes, perfectly designed for cutting through water with minimal resistance. Their tails developed into powerful propulsion systems, capable of generating the thrust needed to pursue prey across great distances. Most dramatically, their limbs transformed into flippers, completely abandoning their terrestrial heritage for aquatic efficiency. Size diversity among mosasaurs reveals how successful their invasion of marine ecosystems became. Some species remained relatively modest, reaching about 10 feet in length, perfect for hunting smaller fish and squid in coastal waters. Others grew into absolute giants, with Mosasaurus hoffmanni stretching up to 56 feet long and weighing more than 15 tons. These dimensions place them among the largest marine predators that ever lived. The hunting strategies these creatures employed varied dramatically across species, showcasing the remarkable adaptability that made them so successful. Some mosasaurs became generalists, opportunistically feeding on whatever prey was most abundant in their territory. Fish, squid, and ammonites all featured regularly on their menus. Others specialized, focusing their entire anatomy and behavior on capturing specific types of prey. Their skulls tell fascinating stories about predatory evolution. Unlike earlier marine reptiles that retained relatively delicate jaw structures, mosasaurs developed massively reinforced skulls capable of delivering devastating bites. Their teeth, curved and razor-sharp, were perfectly designed for penetrating flesh and maintaining grip on struggling prey. The arrangement was lethal, every tooth positioned to maximize damage and prevent escape. Perhaps most remarkably, their jaws evolved a double-hinge system, similar to what we observe in modern snakes. This adaptation allowed them to unhinge their jaws dramatically, opening their mouths to incredible widths. The ability meant they could swallow prey much larger than what their head size might suggest possible. Imagine the advantage this provided, the ability to consume entire animals in single, devastating attacks. The bite force these creatures could generate defies comprehension. Conservative estimates suggest the largest mosasaurs could exert pressures reaching 16,000 pounds per square inch. To put this in perspective, crushing a car requires only about 2,500 pounds per square inch. Their bite force potentially exceeded even that of Tyrannosaurus rex, making them among the most powerful biters in Earth's history. Dental diversity among different mosasaur species reveals how they carved up marine ecosystems among themselves. Species targeting soft-bodied prey retained sharp, pointed teeth ideal for piercing and gripping. Those specializing in hard-shelled creatures developed blunter, more robust teeth designed for crushing through armor. This specialization allowed multiple mosasaur species to coexist without directly competing for the same resources. Their sensory systems evolved, sophisticated solutions for underwater hunting. Enhanced olfactory organs allowed them to detect chemical trails left by prey, essentially following scent highways through the ocean. Their vision adapted specifically for the dimmer light conditions of deeper waters, giving them advantages over prey adapted primarily for shallow water environments. Hunting behavior likely varied considerably among species and individuals. Some paleontologists propose that many mosasaurs were ambush predators, using their massive size and explosive acceleration to surprise unsuspecting prey. They would position themselves strategically, waiting patiently before launching devastating attacks that few victims could survive. Others appear to have been active pursuit predators, using sustained speed and endurance to run down faster but less powerful prey. Their streamlined bodies and powerful tails made them capable of extended chases, wearing down victims through relentless pressure rather than single overwhelming strikes. Social behavior among mosasaurs remains somewhat mysterious, but evidence suggests most species were primarily solitary hunters. However, some fossil sites hint at possible group behaviors, perhaps cooperative scavenging or coordinated hunting, in areas where prey was particularly abundant. The idea of pack hunting mosasaurs adds another layer of complexity to their already impressive repertoire. Competition in Cretaceous oceans was fierce, with mosasaurs sharing their domain with plesiosaurs, sharks, and various large predatory fish. This competition drove continued evolution and specialization, pushing different mosasaur lineages into increasingly specific ecological niches. Some grew longer and more serpentine, others became more massive and powerful, while still others developed increasingly specialized feeding apparatus. The success of mosasaurs represents one of evolution's most dramatic examples of adaptive radiation. Starting from humble lizard ancestors, they transformed themselves into the dominant predators of their marine world. Their story demonstrates how life finds ways to exploit every available niche, how evolutionary pressure can drive remarkable transformations over geological time. Their reign lasted approximately 32 million years, a substantial period during which they shaped marine ecosystems around the globe. Fossil evidence shows they inhabited oceans from the Arctic to the tropics, adapting to different temperatures and prey communities with remarkable flexibility. The end came suddenly, as it did for so many dominant creatures of their era. 66 million years ago, the mass extinction event that ended the Cretaceous period brought their evolutionary success story to an abrupt close. Whatever advantages had made them so successful proved insufficient against the global catastrophe that reshaped life on Earth. Their disappearance marked the end of an entire chapter in marine evolution, the conclusion of the age when reptiles ruled the oceans as completely as dinosaurs ruled the land. The seas they left behind were forever changed, creating opportunities for entirely different groups of predators to eventually rise and fill the vacant niches. Today, only fossilized remains preserve the memory of these incredible creatures, silent testimony to one of evolution's most successful experiments in marine predation. Picture the ancient oceans, 40 million years back in time, when something extraordinary was gliding through the depths. The seas belonged to a creature that would challenge everything we think we know about ocean predators. This was Basilosaurus, a name that literally means king lizard, though it wasn't a lizard at all. The early scientists who named it got things pretty wrong, as often happens when we're piecing together the distant past from fragments of bone. What they'd actually discovered was something far more remarkable: an early whale, one of the first mammals to truly master life in the water. Think about that for a moment, the sheer audacity of evolution. Here were creatures whose ancestors had crawled out of the ocean millions of years earlier, only to have their descendants turn around and dive right back in. It's like watching history fold back on itself. These ancient whales belonged to a family called Basilosauridae, and they represent one of those pivotal moments in evolutionary history. They were fully aquatic by this point, no longer the awkward in-between creatures that were still figuring out whether they belonged on land or sea. Basilosaurus had committed completely to ocean life, yet it still carried the blueprint of its terrestrial past. The body of Basilosaurus was nothing like the whales we know today. Imagine a serpent stretched to impossible lengths, reaching up to 18 meters, that's roughly 60 feet of pure predator. These creatures could weigh between 15 and 20 tons, yet their bodies moved through water with an almost snake-like grace. The spine was incredibly flexible, allowing for these undulating movements that looked more like a massive eel than anything we'd recognize as whale-like behavior today. Modern whales power themselves through water, using their enormous tails, but Basilosaurus had evolved a completely different approach. The entire body became the propulsion system, bending and flexing in waves that pushed the animal forward. It's fascinating how evolution finds different solutions to the same problem: how to move efficiently through water when you're built like a mammal, not a fish. Perhaps the most poignant reminder of Basilosaurus's land-dwelling heritage were its tiny, vestigial hind legs. These little appendages served no real purpose for swimming, just evolutionary leftovers, like finding old photographs in a house's attic. They couldn't support the animal's weight, couldn't help with movement. They were simply there, a testament to where these creatures had come from. The head of Basilosaurus was built for one primary purpose: killing. The jaw stretched nearly 1.5 meters long, armed with an impressive array of specialized teeth. The front teeth were sharp and pointed, perfect for grabbing prey, while the back teeth were serrated like steak knives, designed for slicing through flesh and bone. This dental toolkit made Basilosaurus incredibly efficient at what it did best, which was consuming other marine life. As a hypercarnivore, Basilosaurus ate almost nothing but meat. Fossilized stomach contents have revealed the remains of large fish and other marine mammals, painting a picture of an apex predator that had few, if any, natural enemies. The ocean was essentially its buffet, and very little was off the menu. The hunting strategies of Basilosaurus likely varied, depending on the situation. That long, flexible body would have been perfect for ambush tactics, allowing the creature to approach prey with stealth before launching into explosive attacks. The powerful jaws could grab victims and literally shred them apart, making quick work of even substantial prey. Scientists have tried to calculate the bite force of Basilosaurus, though measuring the jaw strength of a 40-million-year-old predator presents obvious challenges. Based on skull reconstructions and estimates of jaw muscle size, researchers believe Basilosaurus could generate around 3,600 pounds of pressure per square inch. That's enough force to puncture bone and tear through almost any marine animal of its time. While that bite force wasn't quite as powerful as some later ocean predators like Megalodon, it was more than sufficient for Basilosaurus to dominate its environment. Sometimes in evolution, you don't need to be the strongest that ever lived. You just need to be strong enough for your particular moment in time. The senses of Basilosaurus were well adapted for underwater hunting, though they worked differently than modern whales. Hearing was particularly important, especially the ability to detect low-frequency sounds that travel well through water. However, Basilosaurus lacked the sophisticated echolocation abilities that modern toothed whales like dolphins and orcas possess. Instead, it likely relied on excellent eyesight and that keen underwater hearing to locate prey across long distances. This suggests hunting strategies based more on stealth and sudden bursts of speed, rather than the complex sonar navigation we see in contemporary whale species. It's interesting how different lineages of whales developed such different approaches to the same basic challenges of finding food in vast oceans. Unlike many modern whales that travel in pods, Basilosaurus appears to have been a solitary hunter. Fossil evidence suggests these creatures roamed the oceans alone, covering enormous territories in search of prey. Their size and strength meant they could afford to hunt solo. They didn't need the cooperative strategies that smaller predators might require. The bite marks left by Basilosaurus on other fossilized marine animals tell us something important about how other creatures viewed this predator. Even large marine animals seemed to give Basilosaurus a wide berth, suggesting its fearsome reputation was well established throughout the ancient ocean ecosystem. The geographic range of Basilosaurus was impressive, with fossils discovered across North America, Northern Africa, and parts of South America. This wide distribution indicates these whales were highly adaptable, capable of thriving in different marine environments from shallow coastal waters to deep offshore regions. They were true cosmopolitans of their time. Basilosaurus represents a crucial chapter in the evolutionary story of marine mammals. It demonstrates one of the most remarkable transitions in natural history, how creatures originally designed for terrestrial life could not only return to the sea, but rise to become its dominant predators. The whole process raises profound questions about adaptation and the flexibility of life itself. Eventually, Basilosaurus went extinct, replaced by more advanced whale species that would give rise to the marine mammals we know today. But for millions of years, these serpentine giants ruled the waves. A reminder that the ocean's history is filled with creatures that would seem almost mythical if we encountered them today. They inhabited a world where mammals, not reptiles or fish, claimed the throne of the sea. Swimming through ancient oceans, hundreds of millions of years ago, there lived one of the most bizarre hunters our planet has ever seen. Helicoprion, a predator so strange that when scientists first found its fossils, they couldn't even figure out how it worked. This wasn't your typical shark, though it was related to those early cartilaginous fish that would eventually give rise to modern sharks and rays. Picture this creature, roughly the size of a small school bus, cruising through waters that existed long before dinosaurs walked the Earth. We're talking about a time when our planet looked completely different, when continents sat in unfamiliar positions, and when the very air itself contained different mixtures of gases than what we breathe today. What made Helicoprion truly extraordinary was its jaw, or rather, what it did with its teeth. Instead of the neat rows of replaceable teeth we see in modern sharks, this ancient predator evolved something that looks like nature decided to experiment with power tools. Its lower jaw contained a spiral of teeth, wound up like a circular saw blade, with dozens of razor-sharp points arranged in a perfect wall. For decades, paleontologists stared at these tooth spirals in museum collections, scratching their heads, trying to understand how such a contraption could possibly work. Some thought the spirals sat outside the mouth like a bizarre nose ornament. Others imagined it somehow attached to the tail or fins. The reality, when finally understood, proved even more fascinating than fiction. As the animal grew throughout its lifetime, new teeth would emerge from the center of this spiral, pushing the older teeth outward along the curve. This meant Helicoprion never had to worry about losing its cutting edge, literally. While older teeth might dull with use, fresh, sharp replacements were constantly rotating into position, ready for action. Think about the engineering marvel this represents. Evolution doesn't plan ahead, doesn't design with intention, yet somehow produced this self-sharpening biological chainsaw that worked perfectly for millions of years. It makes you wonder what other impossible-seeming solutions to life's challenges might be waiting, undiscovered in the fossil record. Helicoprion measured somewhere between 12 and 26 feet in length, weighing perhaps half a ton or more. But unlike the bulky, heavily built sharks that would dominate oceans in later eras, this predator kept itself relatively streamlined. Its body was built for speed, for those sudden bursts of acceleration that mean the difference between catching dinner and going hungry. The hunting strategy of this ancient predator tells us something profound about adaptation. Rather than trying to crunch through hard shells like some marine nutcracker, Helicoprion specialized in softer prey. Ancient squid, relatives, primitive fish, anything with tender flesh that could be sliced rather than crushed. That spiral jaw worked like a combination trap and meat slicer, drawing prey inward while those backward curving teeth made escape nearly impossible. Some researchers suggest the spiral could actually rotate slightly during a bite, creating a cutting motion that would make modern kitchen appliances jealous. Imagine being grabbed by something that doesn't just bite down, but actively pulls you apart with mechanical precision. The bite force estimates put Helicoprion somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 pounds per square inch, not quite in the same league as Tyrannosaurus rex, but certainly enough to snap bones and slice through flesh with ease. What's particularly intriguing is where this creature chose to hunt. Rather than lurking near reefs or hiding on the ocean floor like an ambush predator, Helicoprion appears to have been a wanderer of the open ocean. It cruised through mid-level waters, probably using sophisticated sensors to detect the electrical fields generated by other living creatures, ability that modern sharks still possess today. This lifestyle required serious swimming muscles, excellent vision for dark underwater conditions, and a kind of sensory equipment that could track prey across vast distances. It's a reminder that successful predators don't just need good weapons, they need the entire biological package: speed, senses, intelligence, and endurance, all working together. The geographic spread of Helicoprion fossils tells another remarkable story. These creatures lived virtually everywhere, from North America to Russia, from Australia to China. Finding the same species across such vast distances suggests something important about both the oceans of that time and the capabilities of these predators. Ancient seas were more connected than we might imagine, and Helicoprion was clearly adaptable enough to thrive in a wide variety of marine environments. Perhaps most impressively, this bizarre predator survived one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history. The Permian mass extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying, wiped out roughly 90% of marine species. Yet somehow, Helicoprion made it through, continuing to hunt in the changed oceans of the early Triassic period, before finally disappearing from the fossil record. The eventual extinction of Helicoprion reminds us that even the most successful evolutionary experiments can come to an end. As ocean conditions shifted and new types of predators emerged, this ancient circular source shark found itself outcompeted or unable to adapt to changing circumstances. Its disappearance marks the end of what might be considered one of evolution's most creative approaches to the challenge of being a marine predator. Today, when we look at the sleek efficiency of modern sharks or the intelligence of octopuses, it's easy to think that current ocean predators represent some kind of evolutionary pinnacle. But Helicoprion suggests otherwise. It reminds us that there are many ways to solve the problem of survival, some so strange that they challenge our assumptions about what's possible in the natural world. The story of this ancient predator also speaks to something deeper about life itself. Evolution doesn't follow rules about what looks normal or conventional. It simply rewards what works, regardless of how bizarre the solution might appear to our human eyes. In the deep time of geological history, our planet has experimented with forms of life so alien that they might as well have come from another world entirely. The ocean has always been nature's most demanding classroom, where lessons come fast and mistakes are final. Picture those ancient waters, stretching endlessly in all directions, holding secrets we're only beginning to understand. Every drop carried the weight of survival. Every current told a story of adaptation. Nature has this peculiar way of crafting perfection through violence. The Mesozoic seas weren't just bodies of water. They were laboratories where evolution ran its most extreme experiments. Predators didn't just hunt, they embodied hunting itself. Their very existence was a testament to millions of years of fine-tuning, trial and error, on a scale we can barely comprehend. Consider the ichthyosaurs for a moment. These weren't just large marine reptiles, they were nature's answer to the question of speed underwater. Their dolphin-like bodies could slice through water with an efficiency that modern submarines still struggle to match. They appeared in the fossil record like actors taking the stage, dominated their environment completely, then vanished just as dramatically. It's almost as if the ocean decided their performance was complete. The brutal arithmetic of survival governed everything. In those dark waters, there was no concept of mercy, no understanding of fairness. A creature either possessed a right combination of speed, strength, and cunning, or it became food for something that did. This harsh reality shaped bodies into living weapons, turned teeth into daggers, transformed fins into precision instruments of death. Deinosuchus represents something fascinating about ancient predation. These massive crocodilians didn't just grow large by accident. They evolved to fill a specific role in their ecosystem. Their jaws could crush almost anything that ventured too close to the water's edge. They were ambush artists, masters of patience, living reminders that sometimes the most effective strategy is simply waiting for the right moment. What strikes you about these ancient hunters is how completely they dominated their respective environments. They weren't just successful predators, they were the absolute rulers of their domains. The ocean bent to their will, ecosystems organized themselves around their presence. Yet despite all this power, despite millions of years of evolutionary success, they couldn't adapt fast enough when their world started changing. Climate shifts can be merciless teachers. As temperatures fluctuated, as sea levels rose and fell, as entire food webs restructured themselves, these apex predators found themselves facing challenges their perfectly honed bodies couldn't overcome. The very specialization that made them supreme in one environment became their weakness when that environment transformed. But here's where the story becomes really interesting. Death, in evolutionary terms, isn't always an ending. Modern crocodiles carried a genetic memory of their massive ancestors. Every time you see one of these reptiles floating motionlessly in murky water, you're looking at a living connection to those ancient giants, their hunting techniques, their incredible patience, their explosive power. All these traits echo across millions of years. Sharks present an even more remarkable case of evolutionary continuity. They've been perfecting their design for over 400 million years, surviving multiple mass extinctions, adapting to countless environmental changes. When you watch a great white shark move through the water, you're witnessing the result of nature's longest-running experiment in predatory efficiency. The resemblance between modern whales and ancient marine reptiles raises profound questions about convergent evolution. Completely different lineages, separated by vast stretches of time, yet arriving at remarkably similar solutions to the challenge of ocean survival. It's as if the ocean itself has preferences, templates that successful creatures must somehow match. Modern oceans still hold territories that remain completely unexplored. We've mapped the surface of Mars in greater detail than we've charted our own deep sea. These abyssal regions exist in permanent darkness, under crushing pressure that would instantly destroy most surface dwellers. They represent the last true wilderness on our planet. The deep ocean creates its own rules for survival. Creatures down there have evolved bioluminescence, turning their bodies into living light shows. Others have developed transparent flesh, making themselves nearly invisible in the eternal darkness. Some have grown to enormous sizes, freed from the constraints that limit their shallow water relatives. Giant squids, with tentacles longer than school buses, represent the kind of creatures that thrive in these hidden realms. They engage in battles with sperm whales that leave scars visible on both combatants, epic struggles taking place miles beneath the surface, witnessed by no human eyes. These encounters remind us that the age of monsters hasn't really ended, it's just moved to places we rarely visit. The philosophical implications are staggering when you consider how much of our planet remains unknown to us. We pride ourselves on scientific advancement, on understanding our world, yet the majority of Earth's biosphere exists beyond our direct observation. What kinds of evolutionary experiments are still running down there? What kinds of creatures are still being shaped by the same forces that created the ancient titans? Every fossil we discover changes our understanding of what's possible in nature. Each new species we uncover from ancient rock formations expands our imagination about life's creative potential. The creatures that once ruled these waters weren't just large versions of modern animals, they were entirely different approaches to the problem of existence. The legacy of these ancient predators lives on, in ways both obvious and subtle. Modern marine ecosystems still organize themselves around the presence of apex predators. Remove the sharks from a coral reef, and the entire system begins to collapse. The balance these creatures maintain has roots stretching back to those primordial seas. Perhaps the most humbling realization is that we're still discovering the rules that governed those ancient waters. Every research expedition, every deep sea expedition Every new fossil find adds another piece to a puzzle that seems to grow larger rather than smaller. The ocean keeps its secrets well, revealing them slowly, one mystery at a time. Picture an Earth that existed hundreds of millions of years ago, when the very concept of dry land was still, in many ways, just an experiment. The oceans back then weren't simply larger bodies of water, they were entirely different worlds altogether. These ancient seas covered vast portions of our planet's surface, creating what we might call a truly aquatic Earth. The moon hung closer to our world in those days, pulling at these massive bodies of water with incredible force. This meant the tides were far more dramatic than anything we see today, rushing in and out with a power that would reshape coastlines in ways we can barely imagine. The waters themselves ran much warmer than our modern oceans, heated by a sun that burned with different intensity. Under skies thick with moisture and gases that would seem alien to us now. All this warmth and all these nutrients created something remarkable, an explosion of life that filled every corner of these ancient seas. But here's where things get interesting from a philosophical standpoint. Abundance doesn't necessarily lead to peace or harmony. In fact, it often does quite the opposite. When resources are plentiful, competition becomes fierce, almost paradoxically so. These nutrient-rich waters became, essentially, evolutionary pressure cookers. Every creature that called these seas home had to constantly adapt, constantly improve, or face extinction. The result was an arms race of sorts, where size, speed, and sheer predatory efficiency became the currencies of survival. The giants that emerged from this process were unlike anything swimming in our oceans today. We're talking about creatures whose very existence challenges our modern understanding of what marine life can become. Some of these ancient predators grew to sizes that dwarf even our largest whales. Others developed hunting strategies so sophisticated, so perfectly adapted to their environment, that they remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Consider for a moment what it means to be a perfect predator. Every aspect of these creatures, from their sensory organs to their digestive systems, had been honed by countless generations of evolutionary pressure. Their eyes could penetrate the eternal darkness of the deep ocean depths. Their jaws could generate crushing forces capable of breaking through the toughest natural armor. Their teeth, often serrated and constantly replaced, could slice through flesh and bone with surgical precision. But perhaps most unsettling of all, these creatures possessed an intelligence, a hunting cunning that allowed them to exploit every weakness in their prey. They understood their environment in ways that went beyond simple instinct. They were the apex of predatory evolution, shaped by an ocean that showed no mercy to the weak or unprepared. The Mesozoic era, stretching from roughly 252 to 66 million years ago, represents perhaps the pinnacle of this aquatic dominance. During this time, the oceans were ruled by reptiles that had returned to the sea, bringing with them all the advantages of terrestrial evolution while adapting to aquatic life. These weren't simply large fish or primitive creatures. They were sophisticated predators with complex behaviors and hunting strategies. Some of these ancient giants were built for speed, their bodies streamlined to perfection, capable of bursts of acceleration that would put modern marine predators to shame. Others were designed as ambush hunters, lying motionless on the seafloor or suspended in the water column, waiting with infinite patience for the perfect moment to strike. The deeper you went in these ancient oceans, the stranger and more dangerous things became. The abyssal depths were home to creatures that seemed almost otherworldly in their adaptations. Bioluminescent hunters that could create their own light shows to confuse and attract prey. Creatures with expandable jaws that could swallow prey larger than themselves. Predators with sensory organs so sensitive they could detect the faintest electrical fields generated by their prey's nervous system. What's particularly fascinating is how these ancient ecosystems functioned as complete, integrated systems of predation and survival. Every creature, from the smallest plankton to the largest marine reptiles, played a role in what was essentially a perfectly balanced killing machine of an ecosystem. Nothing was wasted, nothing was safe, and everything was constantly evolving, to either become a more efficient killer or a more elusive prey. The shallow coastal waters, which today we often think of as relatively safe environments, were perhaps the most dangerous areas of all in these ancient seas. Here, the competition was most intense, the resources most concentrated, and the predators most varied. Creatures that could hunt in both shallow and deep water had access to the widest range of prey, making them the ultimate opportunistic predators. When we look at today's oceans, even with all their sharks, whales, and other impressive predators, we're seeing just a shadow of what once ruled these waters. The mass extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs also brought an end to most of these oceanic giants. What survived was, in many ways, a much gentler, much smaller version of marine life. This raises profound questions about the nature of evolution and survival. Were these ancient oceans simply too harsh, too competitive to sustain themselves indefinitely, or did they represent a peak of predatory perfection that could only exist under very specific conditions? Perhaps there's something to be said for the idea that nature, left to its own devices for long enough, will always tend toward creating the most efficient predators possible. Deep in the ancient waters of the late Cretaceous period, around 80 million years ago, something truly extraordinary prowled beneath the surface. Dinosuchus, a name that literally means terrible crocodile, lived up to its intimidating title in every possible way. This wasn't just another prehistoric reptile. This was nature's answer to the question of how large and how deadly a crocodilian could actually become. Picture a crocodile, but then imagine scaling it up to proportions that seem almost mythical. At 10 meters long, roughly 35 feet from snout to tail, Dinosuchus stretched longer than most modern school buses. Weighing in at approximately 7 tons, it carried the mass of several cars, all packed into a streamlined aquatic killing machine. When we think about evolutionary success, size often tells a compelling story, and this ancient predator wrote that story in bold letters across the waterways of prehistoric North America. The skull alone of this magnificent beast measured nearly 6 feet in length. Think about that for a moment. A head the size of a small car, lined with teeth that could reach 6 inches long. These weren't the cutting teeth of a shark, designed to slice through flesh with surgical precision. Instead, they were built like biological vice grips, massive conical weapons engineered to crush bone and grip prey with devastating effectiveness. Each tooth was essentially a 6-inch spike of pure crushing power. Scientists estimate that Dinosuchus could generate a bite force of around 18,000 pounds per square inch. To put that in perspective, that's potentially more powerful than the legendary Tyrannosaurus Rex. When you consider that a modern saltwater crocodile, already one of nature's most formidable biters, maxes out at around 3,000 pounds per square inch. The sheer crushing capability of this ancient giant becomes almost incomprehensible. Fossil evidence has revealed something truly remarkable: bite marks on tyrannosaur bones that perfectly match the teeth of Dinosuchus. These aren't just any bite marks either. They show signs of healing, suggesting that some dinosaurs actually survived encounters with this aquatic nightmare. It paints a picture of epic battles between titans, moments when the king of the land met the emperor of the water, and sometimes, amazingly, both walked away to fight another day. The hunting strategy of Dinosuchus probably mirrored that of modern crocodilians, but amplified to match its incredible size. Picture this massive predator lying motionless in murky water, perfectly camouflaged, with only its eyes and nostrils breaking the surface. Patience was its greatest weapon. Beyond even those bone-crushing jaws, hours could pass, maybe days, as it waited for the perfect moment when a thirsty dinosaur approached the water's edge. The strike would have been explosive, a sudden eruption of 7 tons of muscle and teeth launching from the depths. The ambush predator's advantage lies not just in surprise, but in the calculated precision of that crucial first attack. For Dinosuchus, with its massive jaws and incredible bite force, that first strike was often the last thing its prey would ever experience. But this ancient giant wasn't just a dinosaur specialist. Like modern crocodilians, it was an opportunistic feeder, taking advantage of whatever the ecosystem provided. Fish, turtles, smaller reptiles, and carrion all supplemented its diet. This adaptability speaks to something profound about evolutionary success. The ability to thrive not through specialization alone, but through flexibility and resourcefulness. The geographic range of Deinosuchus stretched from what we now call Montana all the way down to northern Mexico. It inhabited rivers, estuaries, and coastal plains, demonstrating a remarkable ability to adapt to different aquatic environments. This wide distribution suggests a species that was not just surviving, but truly thriving across diverse ecological niches. As an apex predator, Deinosuchus would have shaped entire ecosystems through its presence. The behavior patterns of herbivorous dinosaurs, their drinking habits, migration routes, and even evolution were all influenced by the knowledge that something massive and deadly waited in the water. It's fascinating to consider how one species can ripple through an entire web of life, creating pressures and adaptations that echo through millions of years. The family tree of Deinosuchus traces back to the Alligatoridae, the same lineage that would eventually give us modern alligators and caimans. But this was an earlier, more massive branch of that evolutionary tree, representing what might happen when nature decides to push the boundaries of crocodilian design to their absolute limits. The late Cretaceous period was ending though, and with it, the reign of Deinosuchus came to a close. The exact reasons for its extinction remain mysterious, probably involving environmental changes, shifting climates, or alterations to the aquatic habitats it depended on. Sometimes evolution takes away what it has given, and even the most successful predators must eventually yield to the relentless march of geological time. What remains today are fossils, scattered pieces of an ancient puzzle that help us reconstruct the life and times of this incredible creature. Each bone fragment, each tooth, each bite mark tells part of a story that spans millions of years. These remnants serve as windows into a world where giants ruled both land and water, where the boundaries between possible and impossible were drawn very differently than they are today. The crocodilian lineage itself represents one of evolution's greatest success stories, a design so effective that it has persisted for over 200 million years. Modern crocodiles and alligators are living links to that ancient past, evolutionary survivors that carry the genetic legacy of creatures like Deinosuchus in their DNA. They remind us that sometimes the old ways are the best ways, that patience, power, and adaptability can outlast even the most dramatic changes. In the grand theater of prehistoric life, Deinosuchus played the role of apex aquatic predator to absolute perfection. It embodied the principle that in nature, there's always room at the top for something bigger, stronger, and more perfectly adapted to its environment. The terrible crocodile earned its crown as the undisputed king of ancient waterways, a title that resonates across the vast spans of deep time. When we picture the vast ancient seas of the Mesozoic era, it's fascinating to imagine what ruled those waters. The ocean was filled with creatures that seem almost mythical to us now, yet they were as real as anything swimming today. Among these marine giants, plesiosaurs stand out as some of the most remarkable predators ever to grace our planet's waters. Picture, if you will, a creature that defies everything we might expect from ocean life. Small heads sitting on necks, so impossibly long, they seem like nature's own experiment in extremes. Solid, barrel-shaped bodies. 4 massive limbs shaped like paddles. This wasn't some random design thrown together by chance. Every single feature had a purpose, honed by millions of years of survival. The sheer variety in plesiosaur sizes tells us something profound about how life finds its own path. Some species grew to lengths of 50 feet, true giants of their time. Others, more modest in scale, reached about 10 to 16 feet. Each size had its own advantages, its own way of making a living in those ancient seas. There's something almost poetic about how Elasmosaurus lived its life. This creature possessed a neck that stretched 10 times longer than its body, a proportion so extreme it challenges our imagination. But here's the remarkable part. This wasn't just showing off. That neck was a hunting tool of incredible sophistication. Think about the strategy involved. Elasmosaurus could keep its massive body perfectly still, hidden, while extending only its small head toward unsuspecting prey. Fish and squid would have no idea death was approaching until that final, lightning-quick strike. The efficiency is breathtaking, really. Minimal energy expenditure, maximum hunting success. The way these creatures moved through water reveals nature's endless creativity. Those powerful paddle limbs worked in rhythmic motions, propelling them forward with surprising grace. Speed wasn't their primary asset, though. What mattered was the calculated power behind each movement, the ability to position themselves perfectly for an ambush. It's curious how myths and reality intersect when it comes to plesiosaurs. Stories of lake monsters have kept these ancient reptiles alive in popular imagination long after they disappeared from our oceans. Yet the truth about how they lived and hunted surpasses any folklore we've created about them. These weren't the slow, lumbering beasts that monster stories might suggest. They were precision instruments, evolved for a very specific kind of predation. Stealth and surprise were their weapons of choice. That long neck allowed them to scout for prey while keeping their bulk hidden, a natural periscope in reverse. The solitary nature of plesiosaur hunting speaks to something deeper about survival strategies. Unlike dolphins with their coordinated pod hunting, or wolves with their pack mentality, plesiosaurs relied entirely on individual skill. In the vast expanses of ancient oceans, where prey could be scattered and scarce, self-reliance became everything. Their diet reflects the opportunistic nature that often defines successful predators. Small fish, squid, shellfish, even smaller marine reptiles, anything that could be caught and swallowed, became fair game. Their teeth tell this story beautifully, sharp and delicate, perfect for grasping slippery prey, but not designed for crushing hard shells or bones. The hunting grounds of plesiosaurs stretched from shallow coastal waters to the deep, open ocean. They followed food wherever it led them, adapting their techniques to different environments. This flexibility, this willingness to go where opportunity called, probably contributed significantly to their long evolutionary success. What strikes me most about plesiosaur anatomy is how it challenges our assumptions about effective design. That bizarre combination of tiny head, impossibly long neck, and paddle limbs looks almost comical to modern eyes. Yet this was a finely tuned killing machine, shaped by countless generations of trial and error. The way they used their tails reveals another layer of their hunting sophistication. While many marine animals rely on powerful tail propulsion for speed, plesiosaurs used their tails primarily as steering mechanisms. All the real power came from those four paddle limbs, working in coordination to provide both thrust and maneuverability. There's something humbling about contemplating these ancient hunters. They dominated Earth's oceans for millions of years, perfecting techniques we can barely imagine. Their success wasn't built on brute force or overwhelming speed, but on patience, precision, and the intelligent use of their unique anatomy. When we think about evolution in action, plesiosaurs provide a perfect example of how life finds unexpected solutions to survival challenges. Instead of competing in an arms race of size and speed, they developed stealth technology, becoming the ocean's ultimate ambush predators. The coastal waters and deep seas of the Mesozoic must have been extraordinary hunting grounds, teeming with life that we can only reconstruct from fossil evidence. Plesiosaurs carved out their niche in this complex ecosystem, becoming masters of their domain through sheer evolutionary brilliance. Perhaps most remarkably, these creatures remind us that nature's solutions often surpass anything we might design ourselves. The plesiosaur body plan seems impossible. Until you understand its function, then it becomes a masterpiece of biological engineering. Back in the Triassic period, around 248 to 234 million years ago, the world was experimenting with life in the most extraordinary ways. One of these experiments produced a creature called Tanistrophes, and honestly, it's hard to imagine something more peculiar, swimming through ancient seas. This wasn't your typical lumbering prehistoric giant that popular movies love to show us. Instead, nature crafted something that defies our usual expectations of what a successful predator should look like. Picture this, a reptile with a neck so long it could stretch up to 10 times the length of its entire body. That's like a human having a neck longer than a school bus. At first glance, you might think this would be a terrible design flaw, something that would make the animal clumsy and vulnerable, but evolution rarely makes mistakes when it comes to survival, and Tanistropheus turned this seemingly awkward feature into a precision weapon. The neck wasn't just long, it was engineered for deadly efficiency. Special vertebrae connected it to the body in a way that provided both flexibility and perfect balance. This meant the animal could keep its body completely still, while its head darted out like a striking snake, grabbing prey with lightning speed and surgical accuracy. It's fascinating how nature can take what seems like a disadvantage and transform it into the ultimate hunting tool. This ancient reptile belonged to a family called the Tanistrophiids, part of a larger group known as Archosauromorphs. These were early relatives of creatures we know today: crocodiles, birds, and the dinosaurs that would later dominate the planet. During the Triassic, the world was practically bursting with reptilian creativity. Tanistropheus shared its time with other long-necked oddities like Langobardosaurus and Dinocephalosaurus, suggesting that having an extremely long neck was actually a winning strategy in those ancient ecosystems. The repeated evolution of these elongated necks tells us something profound about life's approach to survival. When multiple unrelated species develop similar features, it usually means the environment is rewarding that particular adaptation. In this case, competition was fierce, and access to food required innovation. A long neck meant reaching prey that other predators simply couldn't get to, whether that was fish hiding in underwater vegetation or unsuspecting animals at the water's edge. Scientists have debated for decades whether Tanistropheus spent most of its time on land or in water. Early researchers looked at its limb structure and suggested it was primarily terrestrial, perhaps hunting like modern monitor lizards. They imagined it using an S-shaped neck posture to scan for prey while keeping its body coiled and ready to strike. But more recent studies paint a different picture, one of a semi-aquatic lifestyle that gave this reptile the best of both worlds. The evidence points to an animal that was comfortable both swimming and walking. Its strong hind legs and specialized tail features suggest it moved through water, much like a frog, using powerful kicks to propel itself forward. This wasn't the undulating serpentine swimming style of modern sea snakes, but rather short, explosive bursts of speed that could catch prey off guard. On land, those same strong legs carried it along shorelines and through shallow coastal areas where opportunities abounded. What makes Tanistropheus even more remarkable is how its hunting strategy evolved throughout its lifetime. Recent fossil discoveries have revealed fascinating details about its diet and feeding habits. The skull shows conical-shaped jaws perfectly designed for gripping slippery prey, like fish and squid. Deeper in the jaw, curved tooth-like structures provided additional grip for larger, more challenging meals. This wasn't a specialist that relied on one type of food. It was an opportunist that could adapt its hunting style based on what was available. Young Tanistrophes focused on smaller prey, probably tiny fish and marine invertebrates that they could easily overpower. As they grew larger, their diet expanded to include bigger challenges like cephalopods and substantial fish. This dietary shift makes perfect sense from an evolutionary perspective. Young animals need to avoid competition with adults, so targeting different-sized prey reduces conflict within the species while maximizing everyone's chances of survival. The semi-aquatic lifestyle of Tanistropheus opened up an incredible range of hunting opportunities. Imagine an animal that could wade through shallow waters like a heron, dart between underwater plants like a crocodile, and even venture onto land when terrestrial prey presented itself. This flexibility would have made it an incredibly successful predator in the diverse ecosystems of the Triassic period. There's something almost philosophical about Tanistropheus and its unusual proportions. It challenges our assumptions about what makes a successful design in nature. We tend to think of efficiency in terms of streamlined, balanced forms. But here was a creature that succeeded precisely because it was so unbalanced, so seemingly awkward. Its success reminds us that evolution doesn't follow human ideas about good design. It simply rewards whatever works in a given environment. The Triassic period was a time of incredible experimentation in the history of life. Coming after the devastating Permian extinction that wiped out most species on Earth, It was an era of recovery and innovation. Empty ecological niche created opportunities for new forms of life to emerge and thrive. Tenistropheus represents this spirit of biological creativity, a willingness to try radical new approaches to the ancient challenges of finding food and avoiding becoming food yourself. What strikes me most about creatures like Tenistropheus is how they expand our imagination about what's possible in nature. When we look at the animals around us today, we're seeing just a tiny snapshot of life's potential. The fossil record reveals that evolution has tried combinations of features that seem almost fantastical to our modern eyes. A reptile with a neck 10 times longer than its body, successfully hunting in both water and on land. That's the kind of creativity that puts our best science fiction to shame. The extinction of Tenistropheus and its relatives at the end of the Triassic cleared the way for other groups to diversify and dominate. But for millions of years, these long-necked hunters were masters of their domain, proof that there's often more than one solution to life's challenges. Their story reminds us that the history of life is filled with experiments, some successful for millions of years before giving way to new innovations, others lasting only briefly before disappearing into the fossil record. The oceans of ancient Earth tell a story that challenges how we think about transformation. Millions of years ago, during what we call the Mesozoic era, something extraordinary happened beneath the waves. Creatures that had once walked on land made a choice, if we can call it that, to abandon the solid ground forever. These were the ichthyosaurs, and their story reveals something profound about adaptation. Picture this, a reptile that looks almost exactly like a modern dolphin. The resemblance is so striking that it makes you wonder about the deeper patterns hidden in nature. Scientists call this convergent evolution, where completely unrelated animals develop nearly identical solutions to the same problems. It's as if the ocean itself has a preferred design for speed and efficiency. The name ichthyosaur means fish lizard, which captures their in-between nature perfectly. They weren't fish, they weren't typical reptiles. They were something entirely new. Their bodies stretched anywhere from 6 feet to over 80 feet in length. The largest species we know about, called Ichthyotine sevenensis, reached lengths that would dwarf most modern whales. What strikes you most about these creatures is how completely they committed to their aquatic lifestyle. Their limbs transformed into steering paddles, no longer useful for walking, but perfectly shaped for cutting through water. Their tails developed into powerful crescent-shaped propellers that could generate explosive bursts of speed. Some estimates suggest they could reach 40 kilometers per hour, making them among the fastest predators in their ancient world. But speed wasn't their only advantage. These animals possessed eyes that could reach 30 centimeters in diameter, massive organs of vision that tell us something important about their hunting strategies. Such enormous eyes suggest they hunted in deep, dark waters, where light barely penetrated. They were built to see what others couldn't, to hunt where others feared to go. The shape of their skulls reveals another fascinating detail. Long, narrow snouts packed with sharp, conical teeth, perfectly designed for grasping slippery prey. Fish, squid, and other soft-bodied creatures had little chance of escaping, once caught in those precision instruments of predation. Some species specialized in cracking open hard-shelled ammonites, while others focused on swift, agile prey. What's particularly intriguing is the evidence suggesting these predators sometimes work together. Group hunting among reptiles is rare today, but fossil evidence hints that some ichthyosaur species may have coordinated their attacks. Imagine pods of these massive predators herding schools of fish or isolating vulnerable prey. The intelligence required for such behavior suggests minds far more complex than we typically associate with reptiles. Their breathing presents another marvel of adaptation. Like modern whales and dolphins, they needed to surface for air, but their respiratory systems were incredibly efficient. They could hold their breath for extended periods, diving deep into the ocean's darkest regions to hunt. This ability to exploit the deep ocean gave them access to food sources unavailable to surface-dwelling competitors. Perhaps most remarkable of all was their approach to reproduction. While most reptiles must return to land to lay eggs, ichthyosaurs evolved to give birth to live young directly in the water. Fossil evidence shows newborns emerging tail first, just like modern whales. This complete severing of ties to land represents one of evolution's most dramatic transformations. The diversity among ichthyosaur species is staggering. Some were built like sleek torpedoes for chasing fast prey. Others were massive, powerful giants designed to tackle large victims. This variety allowed them to dominate ocean ecosystems across the globe for tens of millions of years. They ruled the Triassic and Jurassic seas with an authority that few predators have ever matched. Yet even the most successful evolutionary experiments eventually face challenges: changing ocean conditions, new competitors, shifting prey populations. All these factors contributed to their eventual decline, but for their time, they represented evolutionary perfection. Creatures so perfectly adapted to their environment that they seem almost designed by an engineer. The fossil record reveals violent aspects of their lives too. Bite marks on bones suggest territorial battles, conflicts over resources, perhaps even cannibalism among juveniles. The ancient oceans were unforgiving places where survival demanded not just speed and intelligence, but occasionally raw aggression. What's philosophically striking about ichthyosaurs is how they represent evolution's creative power. Starting from land-dwelling reptiles, natural selection sculpted them into something completely different over millions of years. Every aspect of their anatomy tells part of this transformation story, from their streamlined bodies to their massive eyes to their specialized teeth. Their story also highlights evolution's tendency to rediscover successful solutions. The similarities between ichthyosaurs and modern dolphins aren't coincidental. They represent optimal designs for aquatic predation. When faced with similar challenges, life tends to find similar answers, regardless of the starting point. Today, when we look at whales and dolphins, we're seeing evolution's latest experiment in marine mammal design. But ichthyosaurs got there first, perfecting many of the same solutions millions of years earlier. They remind us that innovation in nature isn't linear, it's cyclical, with successful strategies appearing again and again across different lineages. The reign of ichthyosaurs lasted longer than humans have existed as a species. For perspective, these reptilian dolphins dominated ancient seas for roughly 50 million years. Their success story challenges our assumptions about reptilian intelligence and social behavior, showing that cold-blooded doesn't necessarily mean simple-minded. In the grand narrative of life on Earth, ichthyosaurs represent one of evolution's most dramatic career changes. They show us that transformation is possible on scales we can barely imagine, that entire lineages can reinvent themselves completely when environmental pressures demand it. Their legacy lives on in the streamlined bodies of every fast-swimming marine predator, a testament to the ocean's unchanging demands for speed, efficiency, and precision. In the ancient seas, evolution sometimes takes unexpected turns. Around 98 million years ago, certain lizards made a choice that would reshape the oceans forever. These weren't just any lizards. They were the ancestors of what would become mosasaurs, creatures that belong to a family we call Mosasauridae. Think about your backyard, where you might spot a monitor lizard sunning itself on a rock. Now, imagine that lizards' distant cousins deciding the water looked more promising than dry land. This transformation didn't happen overnight, of course. Evolution rarely rushes. These early marine lizards were related to the monitor lizards we see today, and also to snakes, which tells us something fascinating about the flexibility of reptilian body plans. While earlier marine reptiles still carried obvious reminders of their terrestrial past, mosasaurs committed fully to their aquatic lifestyle. Their bodies became living torpedoes, streamlined and efficient. Long, powerful forms cut through prehistoric waters with remarkable grace. Their tails evolved into muscular propulsion systems, and their limbs transformed completely, becoming flippers perfectly suited for underwater maneuvering. This wasn't just adaptation, it was revolution written in flesh and bone. The variety among mosasaurs was striking. Some species remained relatively modest, at about 3 meters long, roughly the length of a small boat. Others grew into genuine sea monsters. Mosasaurus hoffmanni stretched up to 17 meters, and weighed over 15 tons. Picture trying to comprehend that scale while standing next to a school bus, then imagining something even larger moving through the water with surprising agility. Size wasn't their only advantage. These massive predators moved with unexpected grace, using undulating motions of their powerful tails to surge through ancient seas. Their hunting strategies varied as much as their sizes. Some were generalists, the ocean's opportunists, feeding on fish, squid, and those spiral-shelled creatures called ammonites that were so common in prehistoric seas. Others specialized in taking down larger prey, including other marine reptiles. This kind of dietary flexibility speaks to something profound about survival, the ability to adapt not just your body, but your entire approach to finding food in a competitive environment. The skull of a mosasaur tells a story of predatory perfection. These weren't the relatively fragile jaws of earlier marine reptiles. Mosasaurs possessed robust skulls, housing teeth that were curved and pointed, designed specifically for penetrating and holding onto slippery prey. Their jaws featured a double hinge system and loose attachment to the skull, allowing them to open their mouths extraordinarily wide. This adaptation mirrors what we see in modern snakes, and it allowed mosasaurs to swallow prey that might seem impossibly large. There's something almost philosophical about this, the way evolution finds similar solutions to similar problems across millions of years and completely different lineages. The bite force of these creatures defies easy comprehension. While measurements vary depending on the species and individual specimen, some estimates suggest that larger mosasaurs could generate bite forces that made even Tyrannosaurus rex look modest by comparison. Mosasaurus hoffmanni may have been capable of exerting between 13 and 16,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. To put that in perspective, crushing a car requires about 2,500 pounds per square inch. These marine predators were operating at levels of force that could shatter armored shells or dispatch large, struggling victims with devastating efficiency. Such power represents one of the most formidable bites in marine predator history. Their teeth evolved alongside their hunting strategies. Most mosasaurs possessed pointed, conical teeth, perfect for grasping and holding prey. But some species developed blunter, crushing teeth designed for dealing with hard-shelled animals. This dental diversity reflects their success in colonizing different marine environments and exploiting various food sources, from deep ocean waters to shallow coastal areas. Sensory adaptations enhanced their predatory capabilities even further. Mosasaurs possessed sophisticated olfactory organs, potentially allowing them to detect prey from considerable distances underwater. Their vision was specially adapted for darker environments, the kind of low light conditions they would encounter in deeper waters. Some paleontologists believe mosasaurs employed ambush tactics, positioning themselves strategically and then launching sudden, devastating attacks on unsuspecting prey. Others likely engaged in active pursuit, using bursts of speed to run down slower animals. The ocean became their hunting ground, and they mastered multiple approaches to exploiting it. While mosasaurs were formidable predators, they weren't necessarily solitary by choice. Some evidence suggests certain species may have exhibited social behaviors, perhaps hunting or scavenging cooperatively, when circumstances demanded it. However, the prevailing pattern seems to have been solitary predation, relying on individual strength, speed, and those powerful jaws to overwhelm prey. The seas of the Cretaceous weren't empty of other predators. Mosasaurs shared their environment with plesiosaurs, various sharks, and large predatory fish. Competition was intense, driving evolutionary innovation. Some mosasaurs grew longer, others more massive. Some developed increasingly specialized teeth, reflecting their preferred prey. This diversification into different ecological niches represents evolution's response to competitive pressure. By the end of the Cretaceous period, mosasaurs had established themselves among the undisputed rulers of marine environments. Their evolutionary journey from terrestrial lizards to gigantic marine predators stands as one of the most dramatic examples of adaptive radiation in reptilian history. It demonstrates how life can reinvent itself completely when new opportunities present themselves. Yet even the most successful adaptations can't survive every challenge. The mass extinction event 66 million years ago brought an abrupt end to mosasaur dominance. Their disappearance marked the conclusion of an entire age of marine reptiles, leaving behind only fossilized evidence of their incredible power and success in ancient seas. Sometimes the most impressive evolutionary achievements serve as reminders of life's ultimate fragility in the face of planetary catastrophe. Picture the ancient oceans, millions of years before humans ever existed, back when the world was a completely different place. About 40 million years ago, during what scientists call the late Eocene epoch, something extraordinary was happening in the seas. A creature that would challenge everything we think we know about the boundary between land and water. Between land and water, this was Basilosaurus. And despite what its name suggests, it wasn't a lizard at all. The name literally means king lizard, which tells us something interesting about how scientists first understood this creature. When they found the first fossils, they assumed it must be some kind of reptile. But they were wrong in the most fascinating way possible. Basilosaurus was actually a whale. Not the kind of whale you might imagine today, but one of the earliest forms of these magnificent creatures. Think about that for a moment. Here was an animal that belonged to a family called Basilosauridae, representing one of the most crucial chapters in the story of how life moves between different worlds. These weren't just any whales either. They were fully aquatic mammals, completely adapted to life in the water. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their ancestors, just a relatively short time before, had been walking around on land. The transition from land to sea, one of evolution's most dramatic transformations, was still fresh in their evolutionary memory. What makes this even more remarkable is that Basilosaurus represented one of the final stages of whale evolution before the modern forms we know today emerged. It was like a bridge between two completely different ways of existing on this planet. Now, imagine seeing one of these creatures. Basilosaurus had a body unlike anything in our modern oceans. Instead of the robust, streamlined shape of today's whales, it was long and serpentine. Almost snake-like, if you can picture a snake that grew to absolutely enormous proportions. We're talking about animals that could reach lengths of up to 18 meters. That's roughly 60 feet of pure predator moving through the ancient seas. To put that in perspective, that's longer than most school buses, longer than many modern whales. And these creatures could weigh anywhere from 15 to 20 tons. The way Basilosaurus moved through the water was completely different from modern whales too. Its elongated form and incredibly flexible spine allowed it to swim with undulating motions. Picture an eel that scaled up to absolutely massive proportions. Instead of the powerful tail-driven propulsion that modern whales use, Basilosaurus would have moved through the water with these wave-like motions of its entire body. But perhaps the most fascinating detail about these ancient whales is what fossil evidence tells us about their legs. Yes, legs. Basilosaurus still had hind legs, tiny remnants of its terrestrial past. These little legs were completely useless for walking, of course. They were evolutionary leftovers, like a signature from the past written in bone and flesh. It makes you wonder about the nature of change itself. He was an animal caught between two worlds, carrying the memory of land in its very skeleton, yet perfectly adapted for a life it had never known before. Evolution rarely erases things completely. It tends to repurpose, to modify, to leave traces of where we've been, even as it pushes us toward where we're going. The real power of Basilosaurus, though, was in its jaws. Picture a jaw that stretched almost 1.5 meters long. That's nearly 5 feet of bone and muscle and teeth designed for one purpose. The teeth themselves tell an incredible story of specialization. At the front, Basilosaurus had pointed teeth, perfect for grabbing and catching prey, but toward the back, the teeth changed completely. They became large and serrated, designed specifically for cutting through flesh. This wasn't just a mouth, it was a sophisticated toolkit, perfectly engineered for the business of being an apex predator. This arrangement of teeth allowed Basilosaurus to do something quite remarkable. It could quickly capture prey with those front teeth, then use the back teeth to dismember its victims efficiently. It's a level of specialization that speaks to millions of years of evolutionary fine-tuning. Basilosaurus was what scientists call a hypercarnivore. Essentially, it ate almost nothing but meat. When researchers have found fossilized stomach contents, they've discovered the remains of large fish and other marine mammals. This tells us something profound about the role Basilosaurus played in its ecosystem. It was an apex predator, which means it sat at the very top of the food web. Very few things, if anything, would have tried to make a meal of Basilosaurus. Instead, it was the one doing the hunting, shaping the entire structure of marine life around it through the simple fact of its existence. The hunting strategies of Basilosaurus were probably quite varied. Scientists believe it would have used both ambush tactics and active pursuit. That long, flexible body would have been perfect for creeping up on unsuspecting prey. But it could also make sudden, explosive attacks, using its powerful jaws to grab victims and tear them apart. When we talk about the bite force of Basilosaurus, we enter into some truly impressive territory. Measuring bite force in extinct animals is incredibly difficult, but reconstructions of the skull and jaw muscles give us some estimates. Some scientists suggest that Basilosaurus could generate a bite force of around 3,600 pounds per square inch. To put that in context, that's enough force to puncture bone and tear through almost any material it might encounter in the ocean. While it wasn't quite as powerful as some later predators, like the enormous shark Megalodon, it was more than sufficient for the environment Basilosaurus lived in. The sensory world of Basilosaurus was quite different from modern toothed whales. It had fairly well-developed hearing, specially adapted for underwater environments, but it didn't have the sophisticated echolocation abilities that modern dolphins and orcas possess. Instead, it probably relied on excellent eyesight and low-frequency hearing to locate prey over long distances. This tells us something interesting about different approaches to the same problem. Modern whales use sound like a sophisticated radar system, building detailed pictures of their environment through echolocation. Basilosaurus took a different approach, relying more on stealth and raw speed and power. Unlike many modern whales, Basilosaurus appears to have been a solitary hunter. Fossil evidence suggests these animals didn't live or hunt in groups. Instead, each individual would wander across vast areas of ocean, searching for prey on its own. There's something almost romantic about that image. These enormous predators moving alone through ancient seas, relying entirely on their own strength and skill to survive. The fossilized bite marks they left behind suggest that even very large marine animals gave Basilosaurus a wide berth. The geographic range of Basilosaurus was impressive. Fossils have been found across North America, Northern Africa, and parts of South America. This suggests these animals could adapt to many different marine environments, from shallow coastal waters to deep offshore areas. Think about what that means in terms of evolutionary success. Here was an animal that could thrive in completely different oceanic conditions, making its living as an apex predator across vast stretches of the ancient world's oceans. But like all things in the natural world, the story of Basilosaurus eventually came to an end. These magnificent predators eventually went extinct, replaced by more advanced forms of whales. Yet, their legacy is profound and lasting. Basilosaurus represents something remarkable in the history of life on Earth. It demonstrates how mammals, creatures that originally evolved on land, could return to the sea and not just survive, but dominate. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't move in straight lines, and that life finds ways to explore every possible niche and opportunity. When we look at Basilosaurus, we're seeing evidence of one of evolution's most dramatic experiments. The idea that an entire lineage of animals could abandon the land, return to the sea, and become something entirely new. It challenges our assumptions about the boundaries between different ways of life, different environments, different possibilities for existence. In many ways, Basilosaurus reminds us that the oceans were once ruled, not by reptiles or fish, but by mammals. Giant, ferocious mammals that had made the incredible journey from land back to water and had claimed their place as the ultimate predators of their time. Deep in the ancient oceans, long before any modern shark existed, there swam one of the most peculiar predators our planet has ever known. This was Helicoprion, a creature so strange that when scientists first discovered its fossils, they had no idea what they were looking at. Picture this. Around 250 to 290 million years ago, during what we call the late Carboniferous and early Triassic periods, the seas were filled with life forms that would seem almost alien to us today. Helicoprion was one of these remarkable beings, a cartilaginous fish that belonged to an ancient family, more closely related to chimeras than to the sharks we know now. The most extraordinary thing about this creature was its jaw, or more specifically, what sat inside its lower jaw. Imagine a circular saw made entirely of teeth, spiraling inward, like a fossil nautilus shell. Scientists call this a tooth whirl, and for decades after its discovery, paleontologists couldn't figure out what this bizarre structure actually was. You see, fossilization is a tricky process. Soft tissues rarely survive the millions of years needed to create fossils, so all that remained of Helicoprion were these strange, tightly packed spirals of teeth. It took years of study and debate before researchers realized these halls were actually part of a living, breathing predator's mouth. The way this tooth whirl worked was truly ingenious. As the animal grew and aged, new teeth would constantly grow at the center of the spiral, pushing the older teeth outward along the whirl. This meant Helicoprion never had to worry about worn down or broken teeth. It always maintained a sharp, effective cutting edge. Think about how elegant this solution is. Most animals deal with tooth wear by either replacing individual teeth, like sharks do today, or by having teeth that grow continuously, like rodents. But Helicoprion developed something entirely unique, a self-maintaining circular saw that got more impressive as the animal aged. These creatures were substantial in size, reaching lengths of 4 to 8 meters. That's roughly 13 to 26 feet. They could weigh over 500 kilograms, more than 1,000 pounds. Despite this impressive bulk, Helicoprion wasn't built like the heavy, robust sharks we see today. Instead, it had a more streamlined, lightweight form that made it incredibly efficient in the water. This body design tells us something fascinating about how Helicoprion lived and hunted, rather than being an ambush predator that lurked on the seafloor or around reefs. This ancient fish was built for speed in open water. It could make those quick, sudden bursts of movement that are essential for catching fast-moving prey. But what exactly was Helicoprion hunting with that bizarre spiral jaw? The evidence suggests it specialized in soft-bodied marine organisms, particularly cephalopods, the ancient relatives of today's squid, octopus, and nautiluses. The mechanics of that tooth whirl were perfect for slicing through soft tissue, not for crushing hard shells like some other predators of its time. When Helicoprion bit down, that spiral could snap shut with tremendous force, drawing prey inward, while those backward curving teeth tore through flesh and bone. Some scientists even think the spiral itself might have rotated slightly during a bite, creating an even more effective cutting and pulling action. Now, we can't measure the exact bite force of a creature that's been extinct for hundreds of millions of years, especially when we don't have complete skeletons to work with. But by studying muscle attachment sites and reconstructing the jaw mechanics, researchers estimate that Helicoprion could bite with a force between 1,200 and 1,800 pounds per square inch. That might not sound as impressive as a Tyrannosaurus rex or even some modern large sharks, but it was certainly more than enough to snap bones and slice through soft prey with ease. The real advantage wasn't just raw power, but the precision and efficiency of that unique cutting mechanism. Living in the open ocean required Helicoprion to be more than just a swimming circular saw. It needed powerful swimming muscles for those high-speed chases, sophisticated senses to detect prey in the dark depths, and excellent vision to navigate the marine environment. Like many cartilaginous fish, it probably had electroreception, the ability to sense the faint electrical fields generated by other living creatures. The success of this strange design is evident in Helicoprion's geographic distribution. Fossils have been found across North America, Russia, Australia, and China. This worldwide presence tells us that Helicoprion was remarkably adaptable, thriving in various marine environments, from shallow coastal waters to deeper offshore regions. Perhaps most impressively, Helicoprion survived one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history, the Permian mass extinction. This event, which occurred around 250 million years ago, wiped out roughly 90% of marine species. Yet somehow, our spiral-jawed predator managed to persist through this biological apocalypse. But even the most successful evolutionary experiments eventually come to an end. By the early Triassic period, the marine environment was changing dramatically. New predators were evolving, ecological niches were shifting, and the world that had supported Helicoprion for tens of millions of years was disappearing. The extinction of Helicoprion marked the end of one of evolution's most unusual experiments in predator design. Here was an animal that had combined speed, precision, and a weapon, unlike anything before or since. Yet even this remarkable adaptation couldn't guarantee permanent survival. There's something both humbling and inspiring about Helicoprion's story. It reminds us that evolution is endlessly creative, constantly experimenting with new forms and functions. The natural world has produced solutions to survival challenges that are far stranger and more innovative than anything human imagination might conjure. Today, no creature in our oceans possesses anything remotely similar to Helicoprion's spiral jaw. The closest we might come to understanding its hunting style would be watching a modern sawshark or sawfish, but even these are pale comparisons to the elegant spiral design that once ruled ancient seas. In many ways, Helicoprion represents the ultimate reminder that our current world is just one snapshot in an incredibly long and diverse evolutionary story. The creatures we see around us today, impressive as they may be, are simply the latest chapters in a book that has been writing itself. For billions of years, the waters of ancient Earth held secrets that would make today's oceans seem almost peaceful by comparison. During the Mesozoic era, these vast liquid realms functioned as nature's most unforgiving arena. Every cubic meter of seawater contained the possibility of sudden death, swift pursuit, or violent encounter. Imagine floating in those primordial seas, where the concept of safety simply didn't exist. Above you, below you, beside you, predators moved with deadly purpose. The water itself seemed to pulse with menace. These weren't just large fish swimming around, they were evolutionary masterpieces, sculpted by millions of years of kill-or-be-killed pressure. The ichthyosaurs ruled these waters with an efficiency that modern dolphins can only hint at. Their streamlined bodies cut through water like living torpedoes, propelled by tails that could generate incredible bursts of speed. Their eyes, some larger than dinner plates, captured every photon of available light in the murky depths. These weren't just big marine reptiles, they were precision instruments of predation. But the seas held other terrors too. Deinosuchus, a crocodilian so massive it makes today's saltwater crocodiles look like hatchlings, lurked in coastal waters and river mouths. Picture a creature over 30 feet long, with jaws that could crush a small car. Its bite force exceeded that of a Tyrannosaurus rex, delivering bone-shattering pressure through teeth designed for gripping and tearing. The fascinating thing about evolution is how it shapes creatures for their specific roles. Every predator in these ancient seas represented thousands of generations of refinement. Their hunting strategies weren't learned behaviors. They were hardwired into their very being. Some relied on ambush tactics, remaining perfectly still until prey wandered within striking distance. Others were pursuit predators, built for marathon chases across vast oceanic distances. The marine food webs of this time operated on scales we can barely comprehend today. Massive fish-eating reptiles were themselves prey for even larger predators. Giant marine crocodiles competed with enormous sharks for the same feeding grounds. The energy flowing through these ecosystems supported megafauna that dwarfs almost everything swimming in our modern oceans. Yet for all their power and dominance, these ancient rulers faced the same fundamental challenge that confronts all life: Adaptation to change. Climate shifts altered ocean temperatures and chemistry. Sea levels rose and fell dramatically. New predators evolved while prey species disappeared. The very success of these creatures sometimes led to their downfall, as they became too specialized for changing conditions. The ichthyosaurs dominated marine ecosystems. For over 100 mammals have existed on land, but even their incredible success story came to an end. Around 25 million years before the final dinosaur extinction, these marine giants began disappearing from the fossil record. Scientists still debate exactly why, though competition from other marine reptiles and changing ocean conditions likely played roles. Dinosuchus met a similar fate, vanishing from the geological record as the Cretaceous period drew to a close. The massive estuarine ecosystems that supported these giants transformed beyond recognition. Rising and falling seas reshaped coastlines repeatedly. The shallow, warm waterways where these crocodilian titans thrived simply ceased to exist in their original form. But here's where the story becomes truly intriguing. While the specific species disappeared, their ecological roles didn't vanish entirely. Nature abhors a vacuum, especially in productive marine environments. New predators evolved to fill similar niches, though often in dramatically different forms. Modern crocodiles carry forward the ambush predator tradition of their gigantic ancestors. Their jaw mechanics remain virtually unchanged after tens of millions of years. Watch a Nile crocodile explode from the water to catch a wildebeest, and you're witnessing hunting techniques perfected in the age of dinosaurs. The scale may be smaller, but the fundamental strategy remains identical. Great white sharks represent another fascinating evolutionary continuation. While not directly descended from Mesozoic marine reptiles, they occupy similar ecological positions as apex predators. Their torpedo-shaped bodies and devastating bite forces echo the design principles that made ichthyosaurs so successful. Different lineages, arriving at remarkably similar solutions to the challenge of marine predation. Whales present perhaps the most remarkable parallel. These mammals returned to the sea relatively recently in evolutionary terms, yet some species have grown to sizes that rival or exceed the largest marine reptiles of the Mesozoic. Sperm whales dive to depths where they engage in battles with giant squid, combat scenarios that would have been familiar to any large marine reptile of ancient seas. The philosophical implications of these patterns deserve consideration. Life seems to have certain preferred forms, certain optimal solutions to survival challenges. Whether we call it convergent evolution or simply the logic of physics and chemistry, similar environments tend to produce similar creatures across vast spans of time. Today's oceans still harbor mysteries that connect us to those ancient seas. The deep ocean remains largely unexplored, with new species discovered regularly in its darkest depths. Some of these discoveries challenge our assumptions about what's possible in marine environments. Giant squid, colossal squid, and other deep-sea giants remind us that size and power never completely disappeared from Earth's waters. Recent discoveries have revealed that some lineages we thought extinct actually persisted in forms we didn't recognize. Coelacanths, presumed extinct for 66 million years, turned up swimming in the Indian Ocean. While not marine reptiles, their rediscovery suggests that absence from the fossil record doesn't always mean complete extinction. The deep sea holds particularly intriguing possibilities. Pressure, darkness, and isolation create conditions where ancient lineages might persist virtually unchanged. Every deep-sea expedition reveals creatures that seem designed by alien intelligence. So different are they from surface-dwelling life. Could relatives of ancient marine reptiles still lurk in oceanic trenches or deep-sea plains? Modern marine ecosystems operate on principles established hundreds of millions of years ago. Predator and prey relationships, energy transfer through food webs, the constant evolutionary arms race between hunters and hunted. These fundamental patterns transcend any single group of animals. The players change, but the game remains remarkably consistent. Perhaps the most humbling realization is how recently humans have entered this ancient story. Marine ecosystems functioned for hundreds of millions of years without any input from our species. The predators we fear today, sharks and crocodiles primarily, represent evolutionary lineages far older than our own. They've survived multiple mass extinctions that eliminated countless other species. This perspective offers something worth contemplating. In our modern world, where human influence extends to every corner of the planet, it's easy to forget that we're relative newcomers. The seas remember creatures and ecosystems that predate our existence by unimaginable spans of time. Those memories live on in the form of living species, ecological relationships, and the physical structure of ocean basins themselves. The monsters of ancient seas may be gone, but their influence echoes forward through time in ways both obvious and subtle. Every breach of a great white shark, every death roll of a crocodile, every deep dive of a sperm whale carries forward behavioral patterns and physical capabilities first perfected